Place, if necessary, the slide and turn the crank 60 degrees through top dead center toward the exhaust side. Use the manual control of the turning gear device to bring the crankshaft into the correct position. Remove the piece of rubber from the crankpin. Check the shaft on damage. Clean the shaft thoroughly and check if the lubrication oil canals are clean. Start with mounting the upper bearing shell. This is the shell without the lubricating oil supply groove. Oil the bearing surface with clean engine lubricating oil. The back surface needs to be clean and oil-free. Before the bearing shell is mounted, the bore and joint faces of the cap must be checked for damage. Make sure that the positioning lip of the bearing fits into the appropriate recess in the cap. Then divide the shell proportionally over the joint faces of the cap. Move the upper bearing cap against the shaft. Then oil the lower bearing shell. This one can be recognized by the uninterrupted lubricating oil groove. Repeat the preceding procedure. Check, before both caps are moved against each other, if the position of the dowel pins from the joint faces are correct. The bearing caps are marked with camshaft side. Now apply the upper two nuts. Turn them by hand as far as possible with a special pin. Subsequently, remove both carriers and apply the two remaining nuts. Turn the crank in top position and remove the slide. To pump the bearing caps tight, the crank should be turned into bottom dead center position. While doing this, guide the bearing block to prevent getting it stuck in the engine. Place the hydraulic tools again proportionally on both sides. After connecting the hydraulic hoses, turn the knurled jack nuts down. Subsequently, bring the jacks simultaneously to full pressure. Tighten the nuts with a special pin and check if all four nuts have the same displacement. Release the hydraulic pressure on the jacks until zero. Completely tighten the knurled nuts of the jacks again. Bring for the second time the prescribed pressure to the jacks and tighten the nuts further if possible. Repeat the procedure once again. When the jacks are brought under pressure for the third time, the nuts should not turn any further. Check the oil clearance of the bearing with feeler gauges.
Today I'll be explaining you about main engine crankpin bearing clearance. So in this picture you can see this is the crankpin and you can see the web. So we have to take clearance at the bottom here and at the top. You can see this is C here clearance and this is B. So how we are going to take the clearance? You have to make the enclosed space permit for entering into the crankcase. So once the permit is ready, then make sure that you enter the crankcase in a safe manner, and you have to have the feeler gauge with you to check the clearance. So what I am going to do is I am going to explain you. This is the table for the clearance taken in the sea trial. So I am just showing you so that it is clear. So I am entering the crankcase here. So you should be very careful because it's very slippery here. So make sure that you are wearing helmet and safety gloves with you. Make sure you do not slip and fall. So once you bring the crank web straight down, so you can see the web here. So you have take the feeler gauge and insert the feeler gauge at the bottom here. One is forward and other one in the aft. You have to take two readings. So make sure while you're putting it inside the bearing, make sure the feeler gauge do not get stuck. So you have to be very careful. You can always, once if it's stuck, then it's a major job to remove it back. So you have to take clearance on both the sides. So once you take the clearance, note it down and make sure when you're going inside the crankcase, make sure that check for any debris of white metal, and this is the clearance taken on the top. You can see here crankpin top. You can see I'm putting the feeler gauge here, sides is going freely here, so you have to check on both the sides, forward and aft, then make a note of it. So if you have any doubt regarding this, you can always message me. So this is how you have to take. So make sure you are doing it correctly, and in case you have any doubt regarding this, you can message me. Thank you.